Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well, having a good Tuesday. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, especially with all of the fallout of last night's WWE Raw Legends Night, the first episode of Raw of 2021. So let's get straight into the news stories and start off, of course, with the biggest fallout from last night's edition of Raw, that being the return of Goldberg to WWE television. Yes, WWE Hall of Famer Bill Goldberg versus Drew McIntyre is now set for the 2021 Royal Rumble pay-per-view for the WWE Championship. Now, last night on the Legends Night edition of Raw, the first Raw of 2021, saw Drew McIntyre retain his WWE Championship over Keith Lee in the main event of the show. Now, after the match, this is where everyone really started talking, moaning and groaning probably at the same time. Goldberg made his return and confronted Drew McIntyre in the middle of the ring. Now, Goldberg gave some props to Drew McIntyre for having what it takes to represent the company as WWE Champion, but then said the one thing that McIntyre does not have as champion is respect. Goldberg then went on and accused McIntyre of thinking low of the WWE legends who came before him. He said he wasn't coming to Raw to demand anything, but he was here to challenge Drew for the title at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Drew then denied thinking low of the legends and said fighting Goldberg would be like fighting his dad. That's where the two faced off, and then Goldberg shoved Drew McIntyre to the mat. Now, this is where it kind of gets a bit controversial, slightly. I mean, there was no controversy in the sense of Goldberg-McIntyre. I mean, there was controversy in terms of Goldberg showing up, but this is when it got a little bit strange, I would say, that essentially when the WWE shows go off the air, you have the graphic in the bottom right-hand corner, all rights, copyright, reserved, all that kind of stuff. That graphic came up when Goldberg shoved Drew McIntyre to the mat, and that's where, for some people in some markets and some countries, the show went off the air. Now, in other markets, they saw what was actually the ending of Raw, where McIntyre, after being shoved down by the ancient Goldberg, got back up to his feet. McIntyre then squared off, nudged his head a little bit towards Goldberg, and that's how the show went off the air. So I don't know how many people saw what ending or which ending. Nevertheless, it was certainly a surprise ending. And Goldberg, you know, it was a surprise. It was a surprise to see Goldberg come out. Of course, Goldberg returning to WWE TV isn't a shock in itself, because this has been something that's been rumoured for a while. Goldberg had actually been rumoured for an upcoming match against WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns during the WrestleMania 37 season, possibly at the event, the Royal Rumble, or somewhere in between. We definitely didn't see Goldberg versus Drew McIntyre coming. Now, there's no word yet on if they still have plans, WWE, to do the Goldberg versus Roman Reigns feud. Of course, Goldberg does have 2 matches per year on his WWE contract. That contract runs through 2023. And of course, Goldberg appeared on the bump, was it last month or a couple of weeks ago, to say that he was still looking to have that match against Roman Reigns. He still wanted to have the match they didn't have at WrestleMania 36 last year. Roman Reigns stole his move and he doesn't have the respect and he owes a receipt coming, blah, blah, blah. To be honest, right, when Goldberg said that thing on the bump last month, right, he said, I want to face Roman Reigns. We didn't have the match. He ran away from me, etc. Everyone went, oh, God. Seriously, we're going to have Goldberg versus Roman Reigns after avoiding it last year, which was not a problem for anyone, by the way. Everyone went, oh no, not Goldberg versus Roman Reigns again. And then the rumours came out that that was the plan for WrestleMania, and people were just rolling their eyes going, seriously? Oh no. So when Goldberg's music hit last night, and I mentioned this, I did a video about the Royal Rumble yesterday in the sense that I was saying potentially Goldberg could win the Royal Rumble. Now, of course, now he's going to be challenging for the WWE Championship, so he's not going to be in the Royal Rumble match. But I said yesterday he could win the Royal Rumble purely because there are no physical fans in the building. And what I meant by that is, if you had a normal world at the moment, oh, heaven forbid, you know, imagine we had a normal world at the moment. But if we had a normal world at the moment, you couldn't have Goldberg winning the Royal Rumble match because the crowd would just riot. They'd be booing him out of the building. They'd be incredulous. People would be so angry and frustrated. But I said with no fans in attendance, just those virtual fans, they can pipe in any noise they want to. WWE controls the narrative when it comes to this WWE Thunderdome shows. They can kind of try and convince fans that it's a good thing and it's a good reaction. They control the narrative. They control the response of the audience. Not on social media, but in terms of the arena and the presentation, they control that. And it's the same now, I guess, for Goldberg versus Drew McIntyre. That could Goldberg win the WWE Championship? Surely not, right? Surely not. That's the question I think people are thinking here. Goldberg facing Drew McIntyre. The interesting question now that people are kind of dreading and certainly thinking about is, surely they wouldn't feed Drew McIntyre to Goldberg. Surely not. I mean, would they? Seriously? And I think the answer, unfortunately, is yes, they would. Now, it's not to say that they will, but would they? Of course they would. We thought the exact same thing about a year ago when it came to Goldberg versus The Fiend at Super Showdown. Everyone went, well, there's no way Goldberg will win. Goldberg will face The Fiend. It's a Saudi event. It's big money. They want to pop a big crowd. They want to get people watching. Goldberg versus The Fiend. Okay, it'll be a match, but Goldberg would lose because The Fiend is this big, dominant, undefeated powerhouse villain, monster heel. There's no way Goldberg would beat him. They wouldn't sabotage such a great character, and they wouldn't sacrifice a great character like that. One of the biggest and brightest new characters they've had in years. Surely they wouldn't have Goldberg beat him. No, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen. Then it did happen in 3 minutes. So I think this idea, this narrative that Goldberg, hey, they wouldn't have Drew McIntyre lose to Goldberg. Yeah, they would. They would. Now, as I mentioned, that's not to say that it will happen. I don't think it will. But fool me once, right? I'm not going to rule it out completely because this is WWE. It's WrestleMania season. The ratings for Raw are down. They are desperate. They're so desperate they trotted out about 20 legends last night to do cameos backstage. They are desperate for anything. To get anyone watching Raw, the Royal Rumble, to get people talking positively about the product. So Goldberg trotting out on Raw, it was a surprise because he wasn't advertised. It was a surprise because all of the indicators said that he would be involved with Roman Reigns and SmackDown going into WrestleMania season. So it was a surprise to see him come out on Monday Night Raw at the end of the show last night. Will it be a surprise if he won the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble against Drew McIntyre? I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore when it comes to Goldberg because Vince McMahon, for whatever reason, adores this man, which is so ironic because for years, he hated his guts. So much so that when Mike Goldberg, the former UFC announcer, was going to come in the mid-2000s to replace Jim Ross, Vince McMahon wanted to change his last name because Goldberg would be associated with Bill Goldberg, who he hated. Now he loves him so much that even though he's in his 50s, even though he had 3 moves anyway, but now he probably has 2, jackhammer, spear, 3 minutes, we're done. He loves him even more, and he should defeat every young superstar on the roster, any promising superstar they've got on the roster. What is this fascination with having Bill Goldberg be world champion? I mean, the fact that he won it from Kevin Owens, he won it from The Fiend, and now he could win it from Drew McIntyre, the WWE Championship. Where is this fascination? It's just bizarre. And once Goldberg's music hit last night, I mean, they used to have that look. They always have that look in WWE when the big monster babyface comes out. So like when Goldberg's music hit, they have the heel or whoever's in the wing do the sort of the slow, like that kind of deal, right? Being like, oh my God, it's Goldberg. Everyone does that watching at home now as well. That's the hilarious thing about it because as soon as his music hits, everyone goes, oh no, surely not. Surely not, because then the concern starts. They wouldn't feed McIntyre to Goldberg, would they? I hope not. I think not, but you can't rule it out. You cannot rule that out because we thought the exact same thing for The Fiend at Super Showdown back in February last year. Universally, everyone thought The Fiend was going to win. That's why it was so shocking that when Goldberg won, everyone went, you are kidding me. You are kidding me. And it will be the exact same if Goldberg beats Drew McIntyre. Now, in terms of stakes of the match, I suppose there are stakes there because we genuinely don't know who's going to win. It's kind of a game of chicken and saying that WWE, they're not that crazy. They're not gonna sacrifice the top talent again at WrestleMania season. They surely wouldn't make the same mistake 2 years in a row, would they? Well, they would because there's precedent for it. Obviously, I mentioned Goldberg beat The Fiend, but you talk about making mistakes 2 years in a row. The 2014 and 2015 Royal Rumble match got the exact same reaction from the crowd. WWE doesn't learn from their mistakes in the modern era, and I would not be stunned to say if Goldberg won the title again around WrestleMania season. I would not be shocked. No one wants to see it. Nobody wants to see it, but I wouldn't be shocked. Because Goldberg has another match on his contract this year. When is that going to be? You would think it would probably be WrestleMania. Probably be WrestleMania, right? So if he loses against McIntyre at the Royal Rumble, then who does he face at WrestleMania? Those questions are then asked. Unless, I guess, maybe The Fiend, if he's not doing anything for WrestleMania. Does The Fiend get his win back at WrestleMania? I don't know. All that I know is when Goldberg's music hit at the end of Raw, I rolled my eyes and went, you are kidding me. And now I'm kind of in a state of slight terror that something bad is going to happen when it comes to the Royal Rumble on the 31st of January because we don't know. We don't know. Anything can happen at this point. And to rule out Goldberg winning the WWE title, you just can't do it. You just can't do it because they've done it before. They've done it before. So you can't rule that out. Speaking of the Royal Rumble as well, we have a couple more names announce themselves for the Royal Rumble match. One of the biggest being Randy Orton, because Randy Orton is now official for the WWE Royal Rumble match at the pay-per-view. Orton, throughout the night last night on the Raw Legends night, played the heel against various WWE Legends and Hall of Famer. And during a segment with WWE Hall of Famer Mark Henry, Orton then declared himself for the 30-man Royal Rumble match later on this month. Orton joined the likes of AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, Bobby Lashley as confirmed names for the 30-man Royal Rumble match. What is interesting about Orton declaring himself for the Royal Rumble match, though, is that there had been this big rumor and report, Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, saying that Orton was going to be facing The Fiend at the Royal Rumble in some form of big gimmick match. Of course, if Orton's going to be in the Royal Rumble match, then it looks like this big gimmick match isn't going to happen. So either that information is incorrect, or plans changed, or maybe somewhere in between that. Either way, Randy Orton is now going to be in the Royal Rumble match instead of facing The Fiend, it looks like, at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Of course, he could do double duty. Of course, he could pull out of this Royal Rumble match and face The Fiend instead. But I would probably look at a scenario now whereby Randy Orton does enter the Royal Rumble match, but that's where The Fiend makes his return. I guess you do have to then question, where does Edge fit all into this? Because as we get closer to WrestleMania, we know we're getting Edge versus Randy Orton 3. We're going to have the final match in that trilogy, but how are they going to maneuver that if you've got The Fiend still feuding with Randy Orton come Royal Rumble season? So it's a lot of moving parts there right now, so certainly going to be interesting. As I mentioned, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Orton could pull out nevertheless, so that's certainly interesting. As far as going back to actually Goldberg briefly there, in that Goldberg, when he came out and said that Drew McIntyre lacked respect for the legends, don't know where he got that from. I really don't know where he got that from. If there's anyone who was disrespecting legends last night, it was Randy Orton, right? But I guess Randy Orton doesn't have the WWE title, so Goldberg doesn't care. It just, again, bizarre. Let's talk about some Ring of Honor news briefly, and I'm not going to go into too much depth on this one because I'm going to do more of a feature-length or full-length video about it later today, but it has been revealed or announced yesterday that Marty Scurll has officially departed Ring of Honor. ROH and Marty Scurll have officially parted ways. The promotion took to Twitter yesterday afternoon to announce that the two sides have mutually agreed to part ways. This is the quote they said in a brief graphic they did on their Twitter account. Quote, Marty Scurll and Ring of Honor have mutually decided to part ways. Now, of course, this was not so much of a surprise, I will say, but if you look at the year that Marty Scurll had, it's very... talk about a fall from grace, because Marty Scurll was one of the hottest free agents, or certainly someone that every company wanted to sign this time last year. Eventually, though, Scurll signed a multi-year contract extension in January with Ring of Honor and also became the head booker. It was certainly a surprising signature and certainly a statement of intent by Ring of Honor at the time. However, later on in the year, he was accused of taking advantage of a 16-year-old girl when she was inebriated during the hashtag Speaking Out movement in the summer. Now, he denied those accusations and claimed that everything was consensual, but ROH announced back in June that they were investigating the allegations, and Scurll had not returned to work as the booker or wrestler since then. His profile was removed by ROH in October on their website, and that was the last update on his status until now. As I mentioned, I'm going to sort of save my opinions on that because I'm going to do a full video later today, but as far as I mentioned at the start, not really surprising. I think it was kind of indicated that was going to be the case for a while now, especially when you look at other aspects of this story. Where does he go next? I don't think he goes to WWE. I don't think he goes to AEW, despite his connections there. Those allegations were very, very heavy, and obviously they are allegations, and you can't really comment on the legitimacy of it. But they're heavy allegations, and I don't think anyone or many promotions will be willing to touch Marty Scurll because of it. So again, we'll touch on it later, but it's certainly not really surprising in that sense. Going back to Raw last night, it looks like we have a storyline unfolding here when it comes to the Flairs on Monday Night Raw, and it was so bizarre, wasn't it? Because WWE began a new storyline with Ric and Charlotte Flair during last night's Legends Night edition of Raw. Now, the first Raw of 2021 saw the WWE Women's Tag Team Champion Charlotte Flair and Raw Women's Champion Asuka take a non-title loss to Lacey Evans and Peyton Royce during the show. Now, during this match, WWE Hall of Famer and father of Charlotte Flair, Ric Flair, was at ringside with Flair and Asuka. Now, everything was going normal, but then Lacey Evans started flirting with Ric Flair several times during the match, which of course didn't sit well with his daughter. Evans later crawled to Ric Flair on the apron, but Charlotte kicked her to the floor. Charlotte then brought Evans back into the ring and ducked a kick from Peyton Royce. Charlotte ran the ropes, but Ric Flair pulled her leg to trip her. Royce then took advantage and pinned Charlotte for the win. Now, after the match is where we really saw what was going on in terms of this new storyline or this angle, because after the match, A stunned Charlotte Flair sat up in the ring and was shocked at what her father had just did to her. Lacey Evans ran over and kissed Ric Flair, but he acted annoyed and upset like he wasn't interested. Charlotte then slowly exited the ring and stared her father down, getting in his face and telling him to stay out of her business again. Charlotte asked her dad if he understood what she was telling him. He just nodded while staring back at her. Charlotte then told Ric to back away and get out. Ric Flair turned away and walked up the ramp by himself, fighting back tears. Now, it wasn't totally clear, I must say, when it comes to this angle in the match, if it was a case of Ric Flair attempting to trip up Peyton Royce, but he got the timing wrong because he was distracted by Lacey Evans, or if he was legitimately turning on his daughter because of the advances by Lacey Evans. I think the timing was kind of wrong. But certainly there was this weird tension being built there between the Flairs. Now, obviously, it could just be a one-night thing. Maybe it's an indicator of Charlotte Flair becoming a heel once again. Now she's returned to TV as a babyface. They're switching her heel, and eventually she'll face maybe Asuka at WrestleMania. I could see that being a case. Or it could be, of course, something that they play out for more weeks now on WWE TV. We've seen a lot of Ric Flair on WWE TV over the last 12 months, regardless of the fact we're in a pandemic or not. So it was very, very strange, and it was sort of continued on Raw Talk after Monday Night Raw, because this tension between Charlotte and Ric Flair spilled over to Raw Talk. After the father-daughter duo joined Charlie Caruso and R-Truth on the show, Charlotte looked at Flair and said, actually, I'm not really sure why you're following me out here, Dad. In his response, Flair said, quote, I already told you it was an honest mistake. Charlotte said, no, Dad, sorry, before asking Ric Flair to leave the set. Now, as the show continued, Charlotte explained why she never needed her father's help to try and win the match on Raw. She said, quote, I know he was trying to help. He would do anything for me. That said, I didn't need his help. I never lost. I get that he's funny and the dirtiest player in the game. I get it. That said, I just want him to stay there and be proud of me. I don't need his help. It boils down to the fact I'm just frustrated that I lost. I'm a sore loser. Charlotte also addressed why she dislikes being labelled as Ric Flair's daughter, despite carving out a great career of her own. She said, quote, a part of me feels bad because I do get to cherish these moments with him. I mean, who gets to walk down to the ring with their dad? At the same time, all I can think about is before I main evented WrestleMania, ESPN goes Becky Lynch, Royal Rumble winner, Ronda Rousey, Raw Women's Champion, and Charlotte Flair, Ric Flair's daughter. That's how they labelled me going into the Mania main event. These little things add up, and tonight I felt like we had the win, and my dad felt it was needed to help. Now, again, it was a really odd angle, Initially, when Lacey Evans was just flirting with Flair on Raw, I kind of just felt like, oh, they're just doing funny Nature Boy Ric Flair, and Charlotte and Asuka will win the match. And then when it played into the finish, as I mentioned, I don't know if the finish was, I don't want to say botched, just the timing maybe wasn't completely right, because it did look like Flair just intentionally grabbed his daughter's foot because of a 5-second flirt from Lacey Evans, which again was very humorous, but I don't think that's what they were going for. Charlotte Flair getting in the face of Ric Flair has been done, 2-3 times at this point on WWE TV too? It's nothing new. It's nothing like, oh, well, I can't believe that's happened, because it's happened 2-3 times at this point of Charlotte getting really frustrated at Flair. So again, I don't know if it's going to be a case of it was a one-night thing just to plant seeds. I think it's probably likely that. Is it something they're going to continue over the next couple of weeks on Raw? I don't care to see it. I really don't care to see it. One, because we've seen it before, and Charlotte's right. You know, she is Charlotte Flair. We don't need to have constant Ric Flair on TV when it comes to Charlotte Flair. I mean, I guess the thing you could say is that when they won the Tag Team Championships back at the TLC pay-per-view, Ric Flair was there, right, looking on backstage. Maybe, again, that was an indicator of Flair being there for Charlotte, and Charlotte eventually turning on Ric to turn heel. I don't know. It just seemed really odd. And, again, I'm not sure it's needed. If you want to have Charlotte Flair turn heel, you just have her turn heel. You don't need to berate her father and stuff like that, because we've seen it before. We've seen it time and time and time again. We don't need to see it over and over again. So I found that very odd, but maybe we'll see something play out in the next couple of weeks or so. We have a new 24/7 champion. Guess who? It's R-Truth. R-Truth is once again the WWE 24/7 champion. Last night, during the Legends Night edition of Raw, Truth captured the championship from Angel Garza. Now, Garza dropped the title backstage during a segment that saw WWE Hall of Famer Tori Wilson direct him into a room where the Boogeyman was waiting for him instead of Cardi B, Ariana Grande, and Kylie Jenner. Yes, that was a real segment. Cardi B's actually responded a couple of times on social media since, going, why are people tagging me for WWE? And probably she might have tuned into the show, go, this is boring, and tune out like everyone else does. But Tori told Garza that Cardi B was in there to watch Raw. Garza ran out of the room in fear and was rolled up out of nowhere by R-Truth. After the match, Truth ran off with Tori and Nikki Cross as WWE Hall of Famer Ron Simmons walked up and delivered his signature damn catchphrase to Angel Garza, who was still on the ground. This is R-Truth's 46th WWE 24/7 title reign. Garza just won the championship on the New Year's Eve edition of TikTok live stream. When it comes to the 24/7 stuff, I mean, I mentioned it time and time again. It's obviously jumped the shark. I think the best thing for it when it comes to the 24/7 championship at this point is how they've kind of used it sometimes before, in the sense that I would just keep it to social media pretty much, because every time it does something on social media, it does make news and people do talk about it, retweet it, like it, look at it, and I think maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe rename it and call it the 24/7 Social Media Championship, something like that instead, right? I think maybe that might be the way to do it. When it comes to the stuff on Raw, they're just comedy segments, and especially on a show like this where it was Raw Legends Night, but the Legends really did nothing apart from cameos. I mean, it was really no Raw Legends in terms of really getting involved in the show, having segments, etc. It was just an episode of Monday Night Raw with every backstage segment having a cameo from the Legends in. That's all it was. So in terms of Raw Legends Night, it really wasn't that. You know, it wasn't like the Raw reunion we saw before where you actually had segments in the ring or anything like that. Quite frankly, I think one of the better 24/7 segments and narratives throughout the show was done during that Raw reunion back in 2019, where they had the Hall of Famers and Legends win the 24/7 title during the show. That was a lot of fun. That's not to say they should have done it last night, because they would have been repeating the same thing they did before. But in terms of being the Raw Legends Night, it didn't really feel like that for me. Again, the Legends were there. I thought the cold open for the show of, was it the H phone with Hulk Hogan and the Hulk Hogan mobile phone, was awful. I mean, terrible. Talk about an opening segment or cold open for the show. If you're watching that show as a casual fan and you saw Hulk Hogan, or you can tweet it, you can like it, you can Instagram, YouTube, and then he picks up the phone, you would just switch it over and go, I can't watch this. It's a bad SNL, that is. It was awful. It was awful, that part of it. And like I said, it wasn't a great show. It really wasn't a great show. It was a 3-hour Raw, and instead of the Legends being involved in segments, they were involved in cameo backstage, 5-second, cameos. That's all it was. It was just cameos. But you can't call it cameos, because if you would, I guess WWE would want a royalty check from that and take the money out of your pocket like they do third-party platform. Let's talk about NXT, because NXT have made an interesting announcement ahead of the New Year's Evil main event this week, because Wednesday's WWE NXT New Year's Evil main event will air uninterrupted on the USA Network. WWE announced yesterday that Kyle O'Reilly versus NXT champion Finn Balor for the NXT Championship will air with, quote, non-stop bout-to-bout action as the first main event of 2021. Now, the New Year's Evil special edition of NXT will air Wednesday night on the USA Network, taking place live from the Capitol Wrestling Center at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. Now, when they've done this before, I believe they did it. Didn't they do it with the Sasha Banks, Io Shirai Great American Bash main event, I think? Was it night one, whatever that was? That did a big number, did a big rating, actually beat, well, it did a big viewership number, maybe not a big rating. It beat... It beat AEW Dynamite in terms of total viewership, but didn't beat them in the demo, because the day NXT beats AEW in the demo, I mean, the world would end, I think, at that point. Nevertheless, it will do a decent number, and it's smart, and I like seeing stuff like this from NXT. I do, because I feel like over the course of maybe the last sort of 6 months or so, look, we're over a year, we're about 18 months, I guess, at this point, into the AEW Dynamite versus NXT Wednesday Night Wars. And it's not much of a war, it's more of a spanking, to be honest, because, quite frankly, every week, pretty much, every week, AEW wins in live viewership and the demographic. Occasionally NXT will win in total live viewership, but they get crushed in the demographic. And at the start, when NXT first came on USA Network on Wednesdays, it did feel like NXT wanted to win, and they wanted to compete, and they wanted to beat AEW Dynamite. And it's felt for a while that they don't anymore, because they've resigned themselves to losing every single week, and it felt like they've resigned themselves to just being... their sole purpose was to take viewers away from AEW Dynamite as opposed to beat them. And it kind of felt like NXT was just WWE's, we don't want AEW to really succeed on Wednesday, so we're going to put a show opposite them. It doesn't matter if they win. They probably won't. What matters is they take whatever viewership they have away from NXT, from AEW rather. That's not to say that if NXT didn't air on Wednesdays, and all of their audience would go straight to AEW, because they wouldn't. They are quite separate in some cases. NXT has a much older audience when it comes to their demographic, whereas AEW has a much younger audience. They do much better in the 18 to 49 demographic, AEW. That's why they're always third, second, or fourth in the cable top 150 or cable top 50. So that's the case when it comes to AEW Dynamite. But it's nice to see NXT try and compete again. Try and beat AEW in terms of total viewership. And it's going to be close this week. I think it's going to be relatively close with 2 TV specials, with 2 big or 2 largely advertised main events. I think I could see NXT winning in total viewership this week. An uninterrupted main event, so no commercial breaks. An NXT Championship main event, Finn Balor's first defense since September. It's a rematch from NXT TakeOver 31. I mean, they've got a great chance. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility of that. But AEW, look, they always do good numbers, especially when they're in competition with another pro wrestling program as well at the same time. So it'll certainly be interesting to see. But I'm happy to see that NXT are at least trying to compete once again, as opposed to just being that show to take viewers away from AEW Dynamite. Let's speak a little bit more about Monday Night Raw again last night, because this was really interesting and disappointing at the same time, because arguably the name that we were most excited to see last night, certainly I was Carlito on Raw Legends Night. But, of course, Carlito and another name, Candice Michelle, were missing from last night's Raw Legends Night edition of Raw. Now, there's no word yet why Carlito and Candice Michelle did not appear, but Fightful Select, which of course is their Patreon service, be sure to subscribe and check that out, they reported before the show even went on the air that it wasn't expected that Carlito and Candice Michelle were expected to attend the show, despite being previously advertised. As I mentioned, this was a huge disappointment to me, because Carlito was arguably the name that I think definitely myself and certainly a lot of people were most excited to see about returning. Did this mean a full-time return for Carlito? Carlito being back on WWE TV for the first time since 2010, I think, so 10 years, 11 years. It was very exciting, and to see that didn't happen, maybe he just saw the creative of last night's show and saw that he was just going to be in a 2-second cameo backstage and go, why would I even bother traveling during a pandemic to do a 5-second backstage cameo for WWE? What, am I crazy? So if that was the case, if he got the creative and said that that's what's going to happen, I wouldn't blame him. And we don't know that's the case, of course, but certainly was really disappointing, because I was excited. I was really excited to see Carlito back on WWE TV, but didn't happen in the end, so very disappointing there. We also have an update when it comes to the court case for Sonya Deville, when it comes to the attempted kidnapping last year. Now, Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville are scheduled to be deposed in the criminal case against Deville's alleged stalker early next month, which was, of course, Philip A. Thomas. Thomas and several police officers are also scheduled to be deposed next month too. Rose is scheduled to be deposed on Wednesday, February 3 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This is according to PWInsider.com. Deville is scheduled to give her deposition to the court via Zoom call on Saturday, February 13 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Several police officers who responded to Deville's 911 call are scheduled to be deposed on Thursday, February 18. Rose, of course, was with Sonya Deville at her home in Florida on the night that Thomas was arrested for the attempted kidnapping and assault. Thomas was charged with aggravated stalking, armed burglary of a dwelling, attempted armed kidnapping, and criminal mischief for the incident at Deville's home on August 16, 2020. He is facing life in prison and has invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Thomas is being represented by a public defender. Now, when it comes to this, again, there's not much opinion to give on this, because the facts are there, quite frankly, and understand innocent till proven guilty. Everyone has the right to a trial. That's absolutely correct. However, I think for the sake of Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose and everyone involved in this, they would like just to get this over with and make sure they receive justice, which of course would be this guy going to jail, going to prison, because if you look at the facts and you look at all of the details that have been released, and I'm sure there are probably others that haven't been released as of yet, it's beyond disturbing. And we've spoken about where fandom goes too far and when fandom gets, perverse and crazy several times here, and it's incredibly disturbing. This whole case is incredibly disturbing, and I think Sonya Deville, I'm glad to see her back on WWE TV. Of course, that's the reason she had to go off WWE TV as well, because of the issues with the legal case and all that kind of stuff. And look, it's horrendously disturbing. It's very disturbing, and I just hope that this can be done quickly, and Sonya Deville can, as I mentioned, get some justice, find some peace, and then just move on with her life. I'm sure that's exactly what she wants to do when it comes to this. But horrible, horrible story. Absolutely horrible story. Hulk Hogan, I wanted to talk about this as well because, of course, Hogan did appear last night on the Raw Legends night, but it was an interview that he did with ESPN over the course of the weekend, I think it was, that certainly got a lot of people talking because he mentioned, he was asked by ESPN what the vibe is like when he goes back to WWE nowadays and what the vibe is like from the guys and girls in the back. Now, during an interview with ESPN, Hogan said, quote, "It's a mixed bag. Some people I get a really warm reception for. Some of the younger guys are really cold to me. Like I'm coming back to steal the main event. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore, guys. I'm not a threat." He also said, quote, "Going back with all of these legends will be a lot of fun. When I've gone back before by myself, there have been certain wrestlers like Edge and Seth Rollins who have told me to my face that the only reason they got into the business was because of me. The newer kids, I don't think they know who I am all the way." And the idea that Hogan is getting a cold reception because the younger WWE superstars are afraid he's going to steal the main event, I don't think that's the case. I think he definitely knows why he gets a cold reception from certain people, and I think the reason he gets a cold reception from certain people is entirely justified, by the way. It's not because they're scared that Hogan's going to take the main event, it's for another reason. I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to give any more credence to what Hogan said in the past, but the fact I'm saying and talking about things that Hogan said in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That might be the reason he's getting a cold reception backstage. Not because Hogan is a threat, not because Hogan's going to steal the main event or main event WrestleMania, probably because of things he said in the past that he didn't really apologize for. He apologized for getting caught saying them. He didn't apologize for saying them, he apologized for getting caught. That's why people are cold to him. That's why a big portion of the fan base, when it comes to pro wrestling, regardless of what Hulk Hogan did in the 80s, 90s, Hulkamania, saying your vitamin, saying your prez, eating your vitamins, they'll always be cold to him because of what he said. And to a lot of people, it is unforgivable. That's why people are cold to Hulk Hogan. Not because of him coming back and stealing the show or trying to steal a main event spot or having the WWE title for one more run. It's because of what he said in the past. Okay, so he is just BSing the reporter or trying to babyface him. I don't know in that situation, but he knows exactly why people are cold to him when he comes back nowadays, because people haven't forgiven and they certainly won't forget. That's just fundamentally the situation when it comes to Hulk Hogan there. A nice bit of news here as well is because WWE have released another tribute video to the late Brodie Lee. WWE has released another video of WWE superstars paying tribute to Brodie Lee, John Huber, who of course passed away at the age of 41 on December 26. The video features mainly WWE SmackDown superstars, including Cesaro, Daniel Bryan, Intercontinental Champion Big E, Dolph Ziggler, Natalya, Sami Zayn, and Tamina Snuka. NXT Champion Finn Balor, WWE Champion Drew McIntyre, and costume designer Sarah Ton are also included in this tribute package. Now, WWE Superstars had previously released a video with mainly Raw superstars and officials remembering Brodie Lee. We mentioned that before here. The video opens with rare footage of Brodie Lee at home, pointing to a local Democrat and Chronicle headline in Rochester, New York, on his homecoming at a WWE live event in 2017. The video includes a few more candid and rare shots of the former Intercontinental Champion, including a clip with Brodie Lee Jr. These tribute packages, the one they did for the Raw Superstars and the ones they did for the SmackDown Superstars, were very well done. Again, incredibly heart-warming and touching, and certainly very, very emotional. I think the Tamina Snuka tribute was absolutely phenomenal, and again, incredibly emotional and sad. Obviously, there's this discussion about WWE, did they do enough with their tributes? I don't know if I necessarily want to talk about that anymore. I've shared my opinion on that. I felt they had the opportunity to do a 10-bow salute and do a tribute package that they aired on TV. It's very disappointing, quite frankly, that they didn't, but I didn't want to turn this into a WWE and AEW who did a better tribute. I thought they paid tribute to John Huber in their own way. Do I think that WWE's could have been better? Yes. But I think the thing you do have to focus on is all of the tributes, all of the touching tributes by everyone across lines, whether it's WWE or AEW or anyone that did fantastic tributes to Brodie Lee, and I think that's the thing we have to focus on there. Speaking of tributes to Brodie Lee, the Being the Elite episode that aired or dropped yesterday on YouTube, the 237th episode of Being the Elite, featured a behind-the-scenes look and footage from last Wednesday's Brodie Lee Celebration of Life edition of AEW Dynamite. Now, the episode featured John Silver defending the BTE title against Marco Stunt, Matt Hardy trying to make a deal with Private Party, and more. But the biggest moment that's really going viral from the episode that dropped yesterday was the speech that Eddie Kingston made during the episode, backstage during the show. He spoke to the locker room after the show. Kingston is being praised on social media for the emotional speech. Now, I was going to read out the entire speech during this, but frankly, I would never be able to do it justice. I really would never be able to do it justice. It's such a fantastic speech. Talk about a locker room leader, and I would definitely recommend just go watch the speech, because, again, me here reading it out wouldn't be able to do it justice. It really is phenomenal. It really is phenomenal, and credit to Eddie Kingston for being a true locker room leader and a true leader of men, females, and just talent backstage. And he gets a big round of applause after he does the speech, because it's just that good. It's that heartwarming, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And AEW are really lucky to have a guy like Eddie Kingston on the roster, behind and in front of the camera. Obviously, the work he's done in the ring and in promos and programs this year is amazing. But that speech, I guess, tops anything that he's done, because I think a lot of people backstage and in the company really needed to hear something like that during that time after that show last week. And I mean, just what more can you say about Eddie Kingston? Just huge respect to him after that speech. It was phenomenal. Have a little bit of New Japan news here, as we have a new IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Champion in Kota Ibushi. He won the titles after defeating Tetsuya Naito in the main event of Night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom 15. This is the first time he has held the Heavyweight Championship, and the second time with the Intercontinental Championship. Now, of course, that was Night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom, so we'll be doing all of the Night 2 stuff tomorrow in tomorrow's news video. He was, and I think at the time of recording, is actually defending the titles right now against Switchblade Jay White in the main event of Night 2. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. I don't want to go into too much to New Japan, because, again, we'll do that tomorrow. And also, New Japan is taking everything down pretty much that anyone said about Wrestle Kingdom yesterday. So I'll keep it brief. But I will say, phenomenal main event. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Kota Ibushi is an absolute star. And the fact that NXT was so close to actually signing him a couple of years ago. Of course, he was in the Cruiserweight Classic and all that kind of stuff. And now the big star he is. I bet those in WWE are like, oh, I can't believe we nearly had him. But nevertheless, phenomenal match. Speaking of New Japan as well, they announced that they have a new mobile game coming soon. During Night 1 of New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom 15, the company advertised a new smartphone game called Strong Spirits, which is currently in development. As of recording right now, the company has created a website, Facebook, and Twitter page for it, and will be releasing more information about it in the coming weeks. So lots of mobile games coming soon when it comes to pro wrestling. Of course, you've got Strong Spirits with New Japan. You've got the AEW mobile games coming soon. And of course, WWE has a truckload of mobile games as well. So certainly a lot of interesting news there for the gamers out there, the mobile gamers. With New Japan as well, Jon Moxley did appear on Night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom 15 in a video package, because just before the IWGP United States Heavyweight Contenders match took place on Night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom 15, the current champion, Jon Moxley, issued a warning to both Kenta and his opponent that he is coming back to Japan soon. In the promo, Jon Moxley said, quote, "Many men have vied for that US title contract. They all thought they would have got off easy. They all hoped and prayed that the United States Heavyweight Champion would never return. But I'm the boogeyman, and I will get you eventually. So whoever walks out of the Tokyo Dome with that contract, make no mistake about it, I'm coming for you." Now, Kenta actually retained his briefcase after the match after landing his go-to-sleep finisher. Originally, Juice Robinson was set to be Kenta's opponent, but he sustained a fractured orbital bone injury just before Wrestle Kingdom, so Kojima took his place in the match. There was no set date as to when Moxley will defend his championship against Kenta. More information will hopefully come out of that soon. I'm surprised at this point that they kept the US title on Moxley for this long, quite frankly, because, I mean, he really hasn't wrestled for nearly a year for New Japan. Obviously, that's not his fault, it's the pandemic. But I'm surprised that given they were continuing on shows and they were still going forward with storylines, I feel like when it comes to contracts, you can only do that for so long. Now, obviously, we know that travel between Japan and the United States now isn't impossible. So it's absolutely possible that at some point, if Jon Moxley were to, say, get written off of AEW TV for a while or something, he could go over to New Japan maybe for a month or something like that with the quarantine periods, drop the title, or do something with the title, they could do it there. Or, of course, Kenta could always fly over to the United States and maybe have the match against Moxley on Dynamite, maybe the beginning of a New Japan AEW relationship. There are options there, of course, so certainly will be something interesting. And I want to see, of course, I want to see Moxley come back to New Japan soon. I really enjoyed Jon Moxley's stuff and just the different presentation of Jon Moxley in New Japan that you see to the presentation of Moxley in AEW. So, and I'm also a massive fan of that United States Heavyweight Championship that New Japan have. Look at that, it's fantastic. It's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? So that's going to be something to watch definitely in 2021. Let's talk about Matt Hardy briefly, because Matt Hardy has called out Vince McMahon for creating the Hardy Bros on WWE TV. Now, through a new video on his YouTube channel, AEW star Matt Hardy has called out Vince McMahon and WWE for putting his brother Jeff Hardy and Riddle in a tag team and calling them the Hardy Bros, while emphasizing that the Hardy Boys are, quote, the greatest tag team in pro wrestling history. Matt said that McMahon created the Hardy Bros to try and recreate the magic of the 8-time WWE Tag Team Champions. Hardy said, quote, there is no doubt if someone ever asked you who is the greatest tag team of all time, it is the Hardy Boys. As a matter of fact, Vince McMahon is so obsessed with the greatness and popularity of the Hardy Boys, he created the Hardy Bros, and he's put together another guy named Matt with my brother to try and recreate the magic that we once had. Matt declared that the Hardy Bros are destined to fail in the WWE. He, being McMahon, trying to confuse the marketplace because he's so vicious, he still wishes he had the Hardy Boys, the Hardy Bros. That's not going to work. You had a better chance with fake Razor and fake Diesel. Now, as previously recorded here and noted here, WWE recently filed to trademark Hardy Bros, which is a sign that Jeff Hardy and Riddle are likely to be a tag team going forward. Although they have formed an alliance on Raw, they've only teamed twice so far, but it looks like something will happen between them in the future. What I will say about this is it's Matt Hardy speaking semi-truth, maybe. He is working on it. Look what he's wearing. He's in the Big Money Matt character. When he does these YouTube videos, he does them to get people talking. Matt Hardy is one of the best out there at getting people talking about what he's doing, what he's saying, what he thinks. Matt Hardy knows how to work social media nearly better than anyone. And he knows exactly what he's doing. So obviously some of those comments he's making there are partially true, but look what he's wearing. He's Big Money Matt in this scene. So he knows exactly what he's doing. So before people say, oh, it's just a massive attack by Matt Hardy, he's working to a degree there. He's working to a degree there. And finally, WWE has welcomed a new Senior Vice President of Creative Writing Operations. WWE has hired Christine Lebrano to work as their new Senior Vice President of Creative Writing Operations. The WWE Careers account on Twitter made the announcement yesterday evening, saying, quote, WWE is excited to welcome our new Senior Vice President, Creative Writing Operations, Christine Lebrano, hashtag where champions work, hashtag welcome. Now, Lebrano's LinkedIn page says she currently runs her own company, Lebrano Media, and has worked as president since launching in January 2020. She worked as the manager of programming and production at Bravo TV from 1997 through 2001, and then spent 18 years at IFFC. She started with IFC in 2001 as the manager/producer of production, and held several roles with the network until leaving in January 2019 as the senior vice president of original programming and development. So maybe she can help with the creative writing when it comes to WWE. It's interesting, all of these positions. I never truly know what these positions really entail. You've got Senior Vice President of Creative Writing Operations. You've got a creative team. You've got executive directors of the creative team. You've got creative writers. You've got lead writers. Who really knows who does what in WWE this day? I don't know if anyone actually does themselves. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So get involved with the community below, drop a comment below, and all opinions are welcome, of course. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.